And we're live. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another live episode. I got my good friend, Richard Cooper. He's been on the show before. I know Richard for a while now, a couple of years, and he gets his fingers in a lot of things. He's a serial entrepreneur, started many businesses, and well, actually has two passions, starting businesses, and he fucking loves cars. I mean, like, if I go to the dictionary for a person that loves cars, that'll be Richard's picture as a definition of a person that loves fucking cars. But lately, like, I want to say lately, but in the last like a year and a half, 2 years, Richard has dived in deep into the whole red pill, blue pill philosophies, looking on what's going on in the world with the PC culture. He has an amazing YouTube channel called Entrepreneurs in Cars. I will leave a link in the show notes. Please go check that out. And so for today's episode, I was trying to talk to Richard about, like, what should we talk about? And he decided, like, let's do a quick overview, quick philosophy of what's happening with PC culture, what's going on, like, what is a red pill, what is a blue pill? And so kind of, I'll leave it to you, Richard, man. Like, what the fuck's going on?
I don't know, man. Your guess is as good as mine. What's going on with culture and politics? I mean, what do you want to start with, like the politics stuff? I mean, we just had this election that finished up in Ontario, and we've finally seen, like, you know, some reason come out of it. It's just unusual and bizarre, the world that we live in. I think, you know, the amount of people that vote for big, giant, incompetent, wasteful government, and they don't see through all the bullshit. And it's not like there's one that's any better than the other, right? I mean, you know, we talk about this offline sometimes when we get together and grab a bite, but it always seems like, you know, the number of people that continue to support incompetence, it skyrockets, right?
Well, for me, I look at it as, from a psychological perspective, I believe majority of people have kid psychology in adults' body. They haven't progressed from I need my parents' help into being independent. And this is why we have a need for big government, because big government will substitute your parents. Big government will protect you. Big government will help you out. Big government will give you hands out.
Well, it's the story that they tell people, right?
Yeah, well, that's the fucking story to tell people. And it's a
very nice story. It's kind of like a Disney-esque, you know, kind of fairy tale ending, right? But how often does it work out for that, you know, for people? And I don't think that they question it enough. It's like, you've got to take ownership for your life. And anybody that relies on other people or a state or anything else to provide, you know, provision and protect them I think it's short-sighted. I don't think you're looking at the whole picture, which is kind of what led me over to the, you know, the philosophies around the red pill community, which is something that some people heavily criticize, but the end result of it, I think, is just taking full and complete ownership for your life and the results you get out of your life if you're navigating it correctly. Because I mean, we were talking, you know, before we went live about the sexual marketplace, because, I mean, let's spend some time on that, right? Because Oscar Wilde said that everything in the world is about sex except for sex. That's about power, right? So some people might disagree with that, but I think if you just look at history and the facts, you know, you can lean on that quite heavily. And one area that people get wrong really, really badly, especially men, is they subscribe to this Disney X, you know, egalitarian notion that things will just work out if you rely on the programming that you've been led to believe to be true. You know, the indoctrination system, which is called schools, you know, by the government, that basically wants to multiply more people to vote for big government sort of thing. Nobody thinks that outside of that box. It's like, why are we trusting everything that everybody's telling us? Like, why don't we question things? You know, there's so many guys out there that I coach on my platform. I mean, my entire channel kind of pivoted. You said early on when we started, it was about kind of cars and entrepreneurship, and that was the original theme, right? It's like, let's hang out with entrepreneurs that have success rides and have them tell the stories about the obstacles that they overcame. But the one theme that continued throughout, even though I kind of pivoted into other stuff, was entrepreneurs have to take ownership for their lives, because you just can't rely on anybody else to deal with problems. You know, you go write that business plan, and then 6 months later, no entrepreneur is even going to go back on the business plan and go, well, I have this problem. Let me go back to my plan to see if the answer is in there, if I can solve it that way, right? It's like, you got to adapt and wake the fuck up and understand that the marketplace is what it is, and you have to accept it, which is the first part that's hard, not fight it. That's where you get these social justice warriors and these left-leaning guys that are just like, you know, I don't know. You want to go down that one? Let's put on our big pussy hat and go for down
the fucking rabbit hole.
Have you got your your pink pussy hat ready, and we can, you know, go have a feminism
I
march?
have a full fucking closet full of them.
We'll get some signs ready.
Yes, let's do this.
And write slut on our bodies and march with women with bras on.
You know what's the craziest thing? The other day I was reading an article. I don't know where they get this research. They ranked United States in the top 10 countries of the most oppressive regimes for women. I'm like, am I living in fucking bizarro land where they have United States? I'm like, you don't mention what's happening in Middle East. You don't mention what's happening with female mutilation in Africa. You don't mention what's happening, like all these nations. You put, you know, I'm like, I'm living in fucking la la land. Like it's backwards.
Well, where is all this oppression that women have? Like where is this male entitlement card that I supposedly have? Like, I'd like to know where that exists, because you don't get it in family law if you go through divorce. You don't get it if a woman screams "Me Too" with a hashtag. I mean, you're automatically assumed guilty. You know, like, where is this privilege card that men are supposed to have?
Doesn't exist, man. At the end of the day, they're just straw man situations. There's a Greek saying, for every finger you point at people, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. And it goes for ownership. Like I'll do say that, like, yes, you know, if we look at when a woman does get raped in North America, going through the, let's say the system, it's very difficult on them. There are certain circumstances where it's very difficult for women, but to paint a brush and to put everybody in the same bucket, that's the problem. And that's the problem with PC culture, because at the end of the day, it creates groupthink. It puts people into a group as opposed to an individual. And that's a huge, huge issue in both evolving a society and growing together as society. It's actually what the PC culture is doing. The progressive are the most recessive. You know, if you don't think their way, they're completely against you. It's either their way or the highway. Funny enough, they're the ones who actually look like, let's say, dictators, where it's like, listen, you have to obey our rules, you have to obey our laws, and if you do not think like how we think, then there's going to be problems.
What did Dan Pena say about political correctness? It's a manifestation of low self-esteem.
Well, he's right.
I mean, it's kind of hard to argue that, right?
He's right.
You know, why do I have to agree with what you believe? And I don't expect you to believe what I believe. That's fine, right? But I mean, the problem I find is a lot of the, you know, the left-leaning, you know, liberals. It's like you said, if you don't subscribe to their belief system, you're a Nazi, or you're some other, you know, fill in the blank, you know, whatever the keyword term is for that time being. But there's no accountability. I mean, you know, you have a hashtag Me Too false accusation, which probably happens as much as the real ones, or it's blown out of proportion, but there's no consequences for that. You know, we've seen great men stripped of titles, of accomplishments, and everything that they've done, even over false accusations, or even accusations that are old as fuck, like 20 years ago. You know, I had this conversation with a guy in my Red Man group when we broadcast, and he said, I wouldn't be surprised if a woman came out one day and tried to accuse Jesus Christ of a Me Too, right? Like there's no statute of limitations on when these accusations can come out with any merit or any proof or anything like that, right? And it's all a function of that political correctness that's just kind of like blown out of hand.
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, you know the Ouroboros symbol, the snake eating its own tail?
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what's happening in the PC culture right now, because they're turning on themselves. Like, for example, there's like, let's talk about religious freedoms. There are people out there, and I truly believe you can practice your religious freedom as long as it does not impose violence and threats on other people. And there's people out there who, in their religious belief, they don't believe in certain they don't believe, let's say, in homosexuality. They don't believe in certain common practices in society, but yet, you know, in the PC culture, one would say, hey, we need to promote that. But now they're eating their own tail, saying, no, forget your religious belief. You're not allowed to believe that in your religious belief. You must accept all. So it's very interesting to see how they want to nitpick and choose what is acceptable, what is not acceptable.
Yeah, it's like an a la carte menu. Like when you see feminists try to align with radical Islam. That's
crazy. It hurts my head.
Like there's women that are getting their heads cut off in a square or stoned because they were raped, but yet feminism is trying to align with radical Islam. I mean, it's just bizarre. I don't understand it. It's like you can't pick and choose.
It's like people calling out Ariana Hirsi Ali, which I believe she's a truth. Like, I don't like the words feminism, but if you're talking about like female empowerment, and creating a world a better place. She's a shining example of this, and people are trying to call her out. I'm like, you demented fucks. Like, do you understand what she went through, where she's coming from, what she's witnessed and been through physically in her own life? But you're calling her an oppressor? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different factions and reality, and people live in their own reality in their head. The feminist movement. Somebody put in the chat over there, hashtag stay woke. Very good. Yeah, you want to wake up for sure. I think overall, and this isn't a binary approach to it, but if you summarize the way feminism has evolved, like every movement kind of has to come to, like, it has a cause, which is let's create equal rights for women, which it did a long time ago, but it never really stopped. It kept going, and it's gotten to the point where it's sending off a lot of signs and signals that it's a supremacist movement, and it's a hate movement, towards men. I was talking to some employers privately in a group who are now avoiding hiring women, because of the hashtag Me Too and the false allegations, and the risks that are associated with that. I mean, guys don't do that. They just kind of like tuck her down and they do it, sort of thing. So it's gotten to the point where it's just gone a little too far, and it ties back into the notion of the political correctness and their left-leaning values towards things that they want everybody to subscribe to, which don't necessarily serve the betterment of mankind or people kind if you're Justin fucking Trudeau. What do you think of Trudeau?
Listen, he's riding on the legacy of his father. He's a hardcore socialist. He's a good.
Do you think that he's Fidel Castro's son? I mean, there's a lot of evidence that points towards that.
Him was he crying, or him sending his regards to Fidel Castro passing away? Like, people understand, like, Fidel Castro was a ruthless dictator.
No, but what I was talking about is, have you seen the timeline about when his mother was in Cuba? And
oh yeah, I've heard the story. I haven't
like
looked into it. So later, I don't know. Maybe, who knows?
Pierre was fairly promiscuous. His mother was a feminist, kind of promiscuous, doing what she wants. And when you see the pictures of them side by side, I mean, it almost looks like Trudeau and Castro. I mean, he doesn't look anything like Pierre, right? No, it's interesting though, when you look at it from that way.
And I think our whole government system needs to change, Pierre. The whole idea that we need a left and right, or like Democratic versus Republicans, or conservatives versus liberals. And
like, you're a big fan of like the state government, or like the city state, right?
Well, it creates laissez-faire capitalism. So at the end, like, originally the United States was designed this way, where you had state laws supersede federal laws, and you create counterbalancing or counterparty risk situations in place. Canada's not like that. We're a Commonwealth. So for the most part, a nationalized law dictates majority of the provinces in Canada. The United States is a little bit different, and that's a little bit better in regards to laws, but that's changing. Amendments are getting changed left, right, and center. Constitution is being eroded in the United States. For me, I'm a firm believer in, like, okay, you have your own philosophies, your own mythologies that you believe in, and if there's certain city-states that you agree with a little bit more opposed to other ones, go there and live there. Like, for me, I'm a big proponent of Singapore. Yeah, Singapore doesn't have a lot of things I agree with, but there's a shit ton of things I do agree with. And they create their own rules, their own taxation. And that's why it's become one of the most prosperous countries in the world in the last 45 years. It's ridiculous what I've done in 45 years. So what I like about city-states is it helps the local people as opposed to the national people. Why does, like, for example, Toronto, why do we as Torontonians have to support the rest of Canada? Why does the Canadian law have to dictate what happens in Toronto? Let's first help our local people. Let's help Torontonians out first. We're the ones paying taxes here. We're the ones dealing with shit every single day living in Toronto. And then once we take care of our own people first in Toronto, then we can focus on, let's say, provincial and then federal. So that's what, like, city-states, they can counterbalance each other out, and it can create much more capitalistic environments.
Yeah, yeah. Are you familiar with Jack Donovan's writing?
No, I'm not.
He has a essay. It's titled "I Don't Care." Let me just grab it real quick, and I'll post it in the chat so people can see it. But it's very similar to what you're talking about. There's this virtue signaling. I don't care, Jack Donovan. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, there it is. There's a lot of this virtue signaling that goes out where we're trying to convince the population that we should give a fuck about everything. Mm-hmm. And when you care too much about, like, stuff all over the world, it's in the chat now for anybody. Oh, it's hidden. I mean, you got to authorize it if you want to share it there, Amir.
Yeah, let me see it.
you know, if you spend way too much time caring about things that are beyond your control, I'm not going to swear too much because it's your channel. I don't want you to get docked by YouTube or anything like that. So let's put it this way.
I make money on this shit. Zero social.
No, man, I just don't want you to, want you to get banged on the live broadcast. But I mean, if you don't manage your energy, and this is what I call Fs, but if you don't manage your energy and allocate it to things that are worthy of your energy, you're going to dispense it on things that aren't deserved of that. And I think we spend a hell of way too much time caring too much about the reporter in some radical Islam country that's been taken hostage and he's got a hood on his head and they're threatening to cut off his head. Well, here's the answer to that. Don't fucking go there, because it's a risky place to be. And why should you care about what goes on over there and their social rights and all that sort of thing? You know, you've got a tribe and a community locally. I mean, the people that care about you, like your family and all that sort of stuff, and your friends closely, that actually contribute, which is the other thing. I mean, a lot of people end up in the category of tax cattle. And, the big problem that we have with politically, correct culture and the way politics is today is this small group of people are essentially treated like tax cattle, and this large group of people that decides what happens with all that money has all the decision making because of the way government's structured, and it just doesn't function correctly. And I mean, I see guys leaving the Western world. Like there's prominent men that I know that have great businesses, that are highly intelligent, that are just checking out of the Western world because it ain't worth it. And they're basically sitting back going, you know what, I'm going to smoke a cigarette and have a drink and watch the world, collapse on itself while I sit here in Acapulco or something like that on a, mountain resort in my villa. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on all that?
I come from I'm a firm believer in obviously looking out for your family first and the closest ones in your life. But I'm also a firm believer in, if you have the power in you, whether that's through influence or through resources, I think you enable the enemy. And the definition of enemy is your own definition, but you enable the enemy if you sit back and do nothing. And so I think, and it's not about like, hey, let me go physically fight. I think that's the worst form of fighting back. It's more or less about empowering people with education, as you are doing with your channel and all the other people are doing. Is the more people that speak up, because that's the thing when it comes to this PC culture, it's the minority that screams the loudest, right? It's a minority screaming at people like little children, emotionally charged as opposed to logically positioned, or logical rationing. Is they're run by their emotion. They're little kids, 5-year-olds. Wah, wah, I want it my way. If I don't get it my way, nothing's going to happen. Wah. That's how they behave in a nutshell. And so if you're in a position of influence or power or resources, and you have some ability to help people in the world, I don't think so you should just sit back and do nothing. I think you should definitely give a helping hand. And, a lot of the freedoms that we have, like people died in World War II for our freedoms here in North America. They gave, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the military complex, I do understand the psychological commitment and the valor they had to go over there and fight. I do understand that. And so they gave their lives for us to have freedoms over here in North America, freedom of speech, right? Freedom of religion, a freedom of choice, but yet it's becoming eroded away. And that's why a lot of these war vets, they're getting fed up as well with what's happening in our society today. And I think it's kind of natural. I think these progressions that we have in society, where it's kind of too far one way, too far the next way.
That's how the pendulum always swings though, right?
It always does. And I think, like I said, going forward in the world, it's definitely going to need to be more or less splinter. And I think we're going to have, as technology evolves, I think technology is an X factor that none of these governments or, let's say, PC police can really control, like with cryptocurrencies, AI technology.
They're trying hard as hell to control it.
They're whatever. They can't really do much, to tell you the truth. But there's one technology that can help everybody. It's a win-win for everybody. So like, for example, the reason why people move to Toronto is because of economic opportunity. They want to be close to a metro hub. They like the lifestyle, etc. Obviously, if you move, it's supply and demand economics, right? More people move into an area, decrease supply of property, increase supply of commerce. Therefore, everything's more expensive. But the technology that can help everybody is faster, cheaper transportation. And so, for example, in Toronto, why should I live in Toronto, pay $2,800 rent for a shitty condo where if I can live in Burlington, where people don't know where this is, about like an hour from Toronto, beautiful on the water, it's stunning, it's gorgeous. If I can live there for, you know, buying a townhouse for $400,000, and I can get into Toronto in 15 minutes on a Hyperloop or some form of really fast public transportation, this helps everybody. So I think in the next 100 years, we're going to have a disintermediation of people leaving big cities. I think more and more people are getting fed up with this 9-to-5 bullshit. More and more people are getting fed up with the government, even though they're not speaking about it publicly. Like if you close doors behind, let's say at a party or your friend's house, most people are fucking fed up. Like people working their ass off and getting taxed up the fucking wazoo, they're fed up. And so we're going to have this exodus of people leaving big cities and kind of going back into more the tribal living, more the organic, you know, me knowing my neighbors. Like I just moved to this townhouse. Obviously, see this, my new, it's empty. I haven't really moved in per se yet. But like I lived in a condo. I didn't know nobody in my fucking condo. I didn't know my neighbors. It could have been fucking sociopath killers or psychopaths. I have no fucking idea. And that's disheartening. Like you don't even know your own neighbors. Maybe they need your help and you just don't know them. You can't really help them out. And so I think more and more what's going to happen is people are just going to opt out of this crazy city life and live a more simpler, peaceful life around people they really care about.
That's interesting because, I mean, you know, we were talking earlier about, you know, the city state and why should we care about like places in Canada that aren't relevant to Toronto? Why aren't we taking care of the local people? But then in the next breath, you're also stating that we should care about people that need help in that area. I mean, like, where do you draw the line in there? Like, how do you distinguish the two between, I don't know, let's say a lobster fishing village in Newfoundland on the Rock, for example, versus the kid in Africa getting his head cut off with a butter knife, right? Like, how do you distinguish where you're going to allocate your energy?
I'm a futuristic individual, and I'm a firm believer that 90% of government responsibility can be outsourced into technology.
Yeah.
Majority of the jobs in the bureaucratic are useless. People literally sitting on their desk and just inputting data, which can...
You probably get rid of about 80% of the government jobs today and not see a difference whatsoever.
Yes. And the efficiency can go up too. Like with automation, you can see transparency. You can see where the money is going. I'm a firm believer in non-violence. So I want to give me the optionality of opting in, right? So right now we don't have the optionality of opting out of our taxes per se, right? We are forced upon to pay taxes. And if we don't, literally a marshal will knock on your door with a gun and be like, theft. It is theft. I've never agreed upon it.
Yeah.
We as a society, did we ever have a democratic vote and be like, we want the income tax to be X? I don't recall that.
Well, the only opportunity we have as citizens is to vote for a government that chooses lower taxation rates. Yeah. But even then, I mean, you're talking marginal. You're talking like, you know, like libtard values, which are bringing them up here versus maybe, oh, we'll take it down like 8, 9, 10%, right? Like,
yeah. The funniest thing, I had a conversation.
Right?
I had this conversation with somebody. He's like, we definitely need to tax the rich more. I'm like, okay, let me ask you this question.
Yeah, and watch more of them leave.
Yeah, well, I asked him this question. I'm like, okay, based on your answer right there, or based on your statement, you're saying you never ever want to be rich ever in your life. You want to stay poor. And he's like, and then you can actually see the gear starting to move in his head. He's like, can't compute, don't know how to respond.
Yeah.
Error.
Well, unfortunately, there's no thought that's put into it. It's just, you know, the system basically punishes excellence because you go and do the work and they like steal the money from you, and it rewards laziness and incompetence. And I'm not suggesting all are lazy and incompetent, but there's a good chunk of people that say tax the rich more that just don't want to compete. They don't want to do the work. They don't want to, you know, take the risk sort of thing.
The funniest thing is the middle class are the ones who are being taxed the most. It's not the fucking rich.
And they don't even know it, right? Like it's not that much difference, you know, for the middle class. And it's like, man, if you guys just wake up and understand that there's an entire, you know, there's an entirely different way to navigate that landscape that doesn't leave you, you know, throwing money at a government that wastefully spends it on dumb shit and virtue signaling. Oh my God, man. It just, you know, I got to shake my head every time whenever I look at government choices, especially in Canada. The best was when Justin Trudeau put his cabinet together. It was like 2015 or 2016. And he had like, I think it was 50% women, or he made it a point to have like 50% female and visible minorities. But when you looked at the stats of the available people that he could have chosen from, I think it was something like less than 23% of them were either female or visible minorities. So it's like, you're not picking the best person for the job. You want to virtue signal and say, you know, da 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 da. And it's like they ask him, well, why'd you do that? And he goes, well, it's because it's 2016. It's like, get out of here, you cuck.
Like, well, that's the whole government. Government is a classic example of how to choose the most unproductive human beings on the planet to try to do the most productive things possible to run a society. It's a complete farce. And the people that, when I hear people that we need government or else we would be in chaos, it hurts my mind when I hear people saying, like, their thinking is we don't have the necessary moral or ethics or organizational skills to organize ourselves as an individual, that we must have the government to babysit our asses, which is an absolute joke. Like, you know, my wish in life, and I don't know what will happen in our lifetime, but who knows, you know, time does fly by fast, especially with the new tech and what's happening in the world, is more and more government positions will be substituted by automation. That is my hope. That is my hope.
Well, I don't think the government's going to let it happen, because for government to survive, they've got to ensure they have big government, which is going to mean that they're going to have to continue to virtue signal policies.
Not necessarily. So how I see this happening is I believe everything is cyclical. Maybe North America's time is up for being the golden place in the world to live. You know, I've spent a bunch of time in China. My last company, as you know, was in China. Yeah. And China, to me, is the most capitalistic, go, so much opportunity. Doesn't matter who you are, no PC. Obviously, there's many negativities with that. But more and more, they're becoming more land of opportunity as opposed to North America. But what I see happening is countries like Estonia, small nation states, where they want to invite people, right? They need their economy to grow, and they're adopting, like, for example, Estonia's adopting blockchain technology where you can become a resident online very easily. They're adopting digital identities for everybody. And so these small city states or small countries that need to increase their commerce, that need to increase their economy, and to attract these attract people, both talent and attract companies, they will be adopting this technology because they're lean, they can do it. And because they want to have a sustainable future for their place. And so we're going to see, you mentioned earlier, and I was like just nodding my head inside my head. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, we will, if things don't start changing in North America, we will see a massive exodus of the most talented people leave. And what I mean by talented, I mean people have a skill to survive, whether a skill as a developer, skill as an entrepreneur, skill as whatever trade you have. If you have high affinity of skill sets within a certain industry, you will go where you have more opportunity.
Yeah, like what I'm seeing is really smart guys that are entrepreneurs that are starting to realize that the juice is not worth the squeeze in Canada anyway, to set up a corporation business that's location dependent. What I see more guys starting to do is create businesses and companies and services and even information products, which is kind of what I'm doing with the entrepreneurs and cars community. Is I'm creating that sort of information in that sense where it's location independent, meaning if I don't like Canadian policy and I don't want to pay the the huge tax burden here to be treated like a piece of tax cattle, I can go and fuck off and I can go somewhere else and I can live in a place that's warmer and I don't have to deal with being treated like a piece of shit. And that's what I'm starting to see. I wanted to ask you though, because you said a few moments earlier, you made reference to chaos. What do you think about Jordan Peterson's book, The Antidote to Chaos, the 12 Rules for Life?
I think it's a phenomenal book. I think it takes a lot of old things that Jung talked about, and also Joseph Campbell. It's also it's a diluted book from his original book, Maps of Meaning. And I highly recommend for people to read it. I don't agree 100% with things that Jordan Peterson talks about, and nor should any human being agree with any other human being 100%. And that's another issue with PC culture. It's like, okay, if one person says one thing that you don't disagree with, that person is evil, which is asinine. Like, the whole point of human civilization, how we evolved, is through communication, is through talking. And the biggest myth, or the biggest misconception that we have today, is human beings communicating with each other. For the most part, especially in debates or public-facing forums, outside talks, people just screaming at each other. No one's really acknowledging each other's point of view and really speaking in and digging down to what do you really care about? One of my favorite negotiation books is Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. And he has a section in the book called, what's it called? That's Right. So there's a chapter in the book called That's Right, where if you really want to break through to somebody and really want to understand them, you want to get to that that's right moment where you understand them so thoroughly, you understand how they think, you understand their point of view, that they're nodding their head and saying, that's right. You finally get how I view the world. And if both sides can do this, if both sides can get to a position of, that's right, then we can finally start talking about like, how do we move forward together?
That's going to be a monumental task. I don't know that either one of us will see that in our lifetime or the lifetime of our kids.
This is why I'm a big proponent of psychedelics, because psychedelics cuts through the fucking bullshit, man. Like when you take a heroic dose of, let's say, shrooms or, psilocybin at 4 or 5 grams, I don't care who you are, it cuts through the bullshit. When you're doing iboga, it cuts through the bullshit. When you're doing, LSD, it cuts through the fucking bullshit. And kind of, we all wear masks, right? And these masks, they originated from, and there's even studies now coming up with epigenetic studies showing that memories and traits and characteristic personalities of people are passed down generationally speaking. So you're actually sometimes either born with a disability for a character or with an ability, a positive ability with a character. And so what these psychedelics do, it literally melts away these front-facing masks that we've created. And all these masks we've created for one specific reason, is to protect our traumas, right? And how we're wired, how we behave, how we view the world, for the most part, is created from the young age, whether we're from the womb, through how our family structure was, how our cultural structure was, how we grew up, were we bullied, et cetera, et cetera. And these masks were created to create kind of like an opera in the world to protect our own inner emotions. And so what psychedelics do, it completely melts away these masks, and we can actually then have a real dialogue and cut through the bullshit and actually talk as true human beings. As Joseph Campbell would say, we let go of our animal nature, right? Our emotional state of me, and then we actually evolve to a true human being.
Yeah, there's a guy in, I guess, the red pill community. His name's Goldman Unleashed, and he's big on psychedelics, ayahuasca, mushrooms, weed. I mean, weed's not really psychoactive in the sense that psilocybin is, and ayahuasca.
It is if you eat it, man. Holy fuck! My worst trip of my life was fucking edibles.
Oh, I love edibles. But like the notion of the whole, kind of like tuning in and dealing with the trauma, like that's one of the things that I've noticed that really has men especially unplug from conditioning that doesn't serve them. I call it the blue pill conditioning, which is, it's a line from the Matrix. Basically, you take the blue pill, you go back to sleep and subscribe to everything being true and, pretend like you don't know the truth, sort of thing. And the red pill is like, let's go down the rabbit hole and see how far this story really goes. And for most guys, going back to the whole thing, being about sex, except for sex is about power. One of the most important things to men is women and interacting with women, and they have that desire to be intimate with women. This is human nature. You're never going to be able to change that. I mean, that's what we're designed to do, is scatter our seeds. We're just monkeys that figured out how to make roads and shit like that. So, it's the trauma that I've noticed anyway, that sends to push people over to the reality of the way things truly are. Guys that subscribe to the notion, well, I got married, I did all the right thing, I bought her the house, I spent $50,000 on the bathroom, but she still started fucking Chad Thundercock, the pool boy. Right? It's like, you don't have the notion of something in that category of a conversation would boil down to relationship equity. You don't get any relationship equity because of Berfolt's law, and you're only as useful to women so long as you provide use to them, sort of thing. So, it's the trauma. So back to the trauma point, it's a trauma that really unplugs people and kind of moves them into new beliefs. And I think that experimenting with psychedelics, like you mentioned, is certainly worth a look at if you're confused about things.
I think it's one of the most powerful, potent technologies we have out there, especially if you do it in a ceremony with a shaman, and you have someone that's guiding you, and you have a specific reason for doing it. Most people, like, I used to abuse drugs when I was younger. I've had 2 ODs in my life, a pretty crazy past. But for the most part, if you view psychedelics as a technology and you approach it, we're like, this is what I'm working on. This is what I want to fix about myself. And if you work with somebody who's a mediator, someone to guide you through the experience, the benefits are like 100x as opposed to you just playing around with it.
Yeah. Yep. Do you want to deal with any of the questions that are coming through the comments before we switch over and start talking about crypto on my channel, or
I don't know.
See anything coming up there? Because we kind of want to budget about half an hour for this one, right?
Yeah, we can go a little bit longer. I don't know. People talking about governments.
Government, small governments. What's the main reason for having smaller government in your opinion? Because they're incompetent. I mean, you know, I think like employees aren't very efficient to begin with. You know, if you can automate or outsource certain functions, because even when you pay an employee, you're paying, I don't know, whatever it is in Canada, like 18, 20% more with EI, source deductions,
Yep.
EHT, all those other taxes and things you got to deal with. And then you got to deal with other problems like they're fucking each other. You got to deal with the drama. You got to deal with labor board issues and blah, blah, blah. And I think government workers in general are considerably less efficient. That's been my experience anyway. I mean, I spent a year and a half lobbying the government on Bill 55. This was in 2012, which was a colossal waste of my time and money. And I was shocked by the amount of waste and incompetence at you know, government levels and positions. I mean, you can wipe out 80%. I mean, as long as you preserve hospitals, fire services, policing, you know,
major. Listen, it's the basic. Keep a military and have it by volunteering only, non-forced. Right. Have a police force, protect my property rights, and that's it.
Yeah, but wipe out the incompetence, you know, completely, and get rid of those nonsense jobs that they like. I don't know. I fucking read somewhere that Trudeau wants to create like a feminist cabinet or a minister of feminism or some shit like that. Like, get the fuck out of town.
Well, by PC culture rules.
Yeah, I know, right?
That is offensive, though, for me as a male.
Well, you can offend this.
Right? It's offensive as me, right? What is this? You can't just have a female cabinet. There has to be men involved in that. Yes. You see what I mean? It's a fucking, he eats his own tail.
It does, yeah. And it's, you know, like I said, my belief is anyways, you know, at some point, I'm just going to be like, you know what? I'm going to sit back on a cliff somewhere in Mexico and just watch the whole thing collapse on itself, because it's just not sustainable. You know, they keep creating more debt, which they have no means to pay off whatsoever. You know, you got a currency that makes no sense, that devalues itself. I mean, you know, we'll get into the crypto stuff later on, maybe on my channel, because I want to do some updates for my guys there. But it's just, where does this go? Like, you know, how do you fix this colossal nonsense that we've created? It's like, if everybody takes ownership for their lives, everything would just fix itself.
If you look at Austrian economics, so we're functioning on Keynesian economics, but if you look at Austrian economics and there's basic supply and demand mathematics, we are in for a really, really bumpy ride. You know, we're going to have hyperinflation of our dollar. Already, the Bank of Canada now is saying 2 interest hikes this year, which are still nothing. It's like 1/4%.
Which they can't afford to do anyway. I mean, it's not going to change anything.
No, not at all, right? So I think more and more what you'll see is we'll have a collapse. We'll have an economic collapse. And at least in the fiat world, money is a zero-sum game, and that money will flow somewhere else. And so, for example, China's buying up everything right now for dirt cheap. They hold these bonds globally for all these different nations. And so money's flowing into another area. And so smart people who are capable, I wouldn't say smart, I would say people who are willing to work hard, they will follow where the money flows, right? So if we have an economic crisis here in North America, which in my, you know, even Ray Dalio talks about this with his macroeconomic model. My viewpoint is I think we'll have a 10x bigger disaster than we did in 2008 with the real estate crash. But also with any issue, an economic crisis like this, there's opportunity for people to come in, to buy things cheap, to get talent cheap, and to start building and optimizing. But we're in a very, you know, we'll talk a little bit more on your channel about this, but we're in a very interesting period of time where it's like we have different X factors involved in global economy. We have cryptocurrency, the fact that you don't have to live where you're working, or like global economic workforce. More and more people are specifically getting fed up with taxes. So more and more people are going to jurisdictions who don't charge you for income tax, which is massive. One of my things I always tell people is like, if the government really wants for you to save money, stop charging in, like, let go of the income tax. That's it. I have automatically more money in my fucking pocket.
Yeah, but they can't because they rely on the revenue to pay for dumb shit.
I know. And the thing people look at, it's the roads. Like, actually, no, it's not. Income tax does not pay for the roads. Roads and infrastructure is paid by sales tax. In fact, I had no fucking idea where income tax goes.
Do we even know where they send it? Like, what do they do with it? Or is it like part of the billions of dollars in aid that Justin Trudeau sends to places that shouldn't really fucking have it when we have bigger problems here in Canada?
Exactly.
You want to wrap up and switch over to crypto on my channel? I want to give my guys an update on what's going on in the landscape.
Yeah, let's go. All right, guys. If you want to catch more of what Richard's doing, head over to Entrepreneurs in Cars. I will leave a link in the show notes after this, and talk to you guys soon. Peace.
Thanks, brother.